Before we begin, I want to take a moment to honor the cultures behind the stories we are about to explore. The tales shared here come from many peoples, lands, and traditions. I do not change these stories to fit modern expectations or to align with today's social standards. Instead, I present them as they were told, sometimes beautiful, sometimes harsh, sometimes challenging. We are not here to judge the past, but to understand it, to listen, to learn, and to honor the ancestors who carried these stories forward. We also share stories from various religious traditions. These are presented in their historical and spiritual context, with respect for their beliefs that they represent. Every culture deserves respect, context, and acknowledgement, and this space is dedicated to doing exactly that. Story 1. Pachamama, the offering that sustains the world. High among the towering peaks of the Andes, where mountains are regarded not as objects but as living presences, and the earth itself is viewed as sacred, there exists a powerful understanding of life centered on Pachamama. Often translated as Mother Earth, Pachamama is far more than a goddess. She is the living earth itself, the source of nourishment, fertility, and balance. She is the soil that grows crops, the water that sustains communities, and the cycles of seasons that shape existence. Within Andean traditions, people do not see themselves as separate from nature. Instead, they exist within a relationship of mutual care and reciprocity. Life is received from Pachamama, and because it is received, something must be given in return. This belief forms the foundation of a worldview where gratitude is not merely a feeling, but an essential practice. To take continually, without acknowledgement, creates imbalance. To give thanks helps restore harmony. One of the most important ways this relationship is honored is through offerings known as despachos. These ceremonial gifts are often made from simple but meaningful items such as coca leaves, flowers, grains, sweets, seeds, and food. Each item is carefully selected and placed with intention, creating a symbolic expression of gratitude. This process itself is often slow and thoughtful, encouraging participants to reflect on what they have received from the earth. Once completed, the offering is returned to Pachamama, sometimes buried in the ground and sometimes burned in ceremonial fire. These acts are not transactions meant to secure rewards or guarantee prosperity. Instead, they are expressions of respect. The value lies not in the objects themselves, but in the recognition they represent. Through the offering, people acknowledge that food, shelter, and survival are gifts arising from a larger living system. The despachos becomes a reminder that abundance is sustained through relationship rather than ownership. The deeper lesson of Pachamama is that gratitude should not depend on circumstances. It is not reserved only for times of abundance. Even during hardship, uncertainty, or scarcity, gratitude remains important because it keeps people connected to what sustains them. The practice teaches that abundance is not measured solely by how much one possesses, but by awareness of what continues to support life. Giving thanks changes perception. It shifts the focus from entitlement to appreciation and from taking to receiving. In doing so, it deepens connection to both the earth and the community. The story of Pachamama reminds us that life flourishes through reciprocity. Every act of gratitude becomes part of an ongoing exchange between people in the living world. In every moment when we pause to honor what supports us, return something with intention, and recognize our place within a larger cycle, we touch the wisdom of Pachamama. It is a reminder that abundance grows not only for what we receive, but from how we choose to give thanks. Story 2, The First Fruits, Giving Before Taking. Within the Yoruba tradition, life is understood as a network of relationships connecting people, nature, ancestors, and the divine forces known as the Orisha. Abundance does not arise from human effort alone, but through the cooperation of many visible and invisible forces. Rain falls, crops grow, wisdom guides decisions, and communities thrive because balance is maintained between the human world and the spiritual world. Because of this understanding, receiving is never separated from giving. One of the most important expressions of this principle is found in the practice of offering the first fruits of a harvest. Before the earliest crops are eaten or distributed, a portion is set aside and offered in gratitude. The simple act reflects a profound belief: what is received should first be honored before it is used. The first fruits ceremonies often take place during times of harvest, when fields are filled with the result of months of labor. Fruits, grains, or other crops are gathered, but before anyone enjoys them, a portion is dedicated to the divine. These offerings may be accompanied by song, prayers, drumming, and communal celebration. They honor Orisha such as Orunmila, associated with wisdom and destiny, or Oshun, associated with fertility, beauty, and abundance. The atmosphere is not one of sacrifice through loss, but of joyful recognition. The first portion, given away, symbolizes gratitude for everything that made the harvest possible. It reminds the community that abundance is not self-created. Human effort matters, but it exists within a larger web of support. By offering first, people acknowledge their place within that web and affirm their commitment to maintaining balance. What makes this tradition especially meaningful is the way it challenges instinct. When a harvest arrives, the natural impulse is to enjoy it immediately. The first fruits ceremony creates a pause before consumption. It encourages reflection before possession and gratitude before use. This interruption transforms the experience of abundance. Rather than focusing solely on what has been gained, attention shifts toward the relationships that made the gain possible. In Yoruba thought, abundance is strengthened through circulation rather than accumulation. To give first is to keep the flow open. To take without acknowledgement risks disrupting that balance. The practice teaches that gratitude is most powerful when expressed at the moment of receiving, not after everything has already been claimed. The story of the first fruits reminds us that appreciation can come before possession. In every moment when we pause to acknowledge the gift before using it, when we recognize the people, forces, and circumstances that made something possible, we participate in the wisdom of this tradition. Gratitude becomes more than a feeling, it becomes a practice that transforms receiving into relationship and abundance into something shared. Through giving first, the Yoruba tradition teaches that what is honored continues to flourish. Story 3: The Psalms of Harvest, Gratitude Spoken into the World. In the ancient lands of Israel, life was deeply connected to the rhythms of the earth. Farmers watched the skies of rain, tended their fields through changing seasons, and depended upon harvest for survival. While hard work was essential, the people understood that crops did not grow through human effort alone. Rain, sunlight, fertile soil, and the passing of seasons all existed beyond human control. Because of this, harvest was never seen as a purely personal achievement. It was viewed as a gift, a blessing that emerged through the partnership of human labor and divine provision. This understanding gave rise to traditions of thanksgiving that became woven into the spiritual life of the community. Among the most powerful expressions of this gratitude were the Psalms, sacred songs and prayers that gave voice to the recognition that life itself depended upon gifts received rather than rewards earned. Many of the Psalms celebrate the abundance of the earth and the generosity of God. Psalm 65, for example, speaks of the earth being watered, enriched, and crowned with bounty, while Psalm 126 reflects upon those who sow in tears and reap in joy. These songs were not simply poetry, they were acts of acknowledgement. During harvest seasons, people gathered not only crops, but also words of gratitude. Thanksgiving was spoken aloud through prayer, worship, and communal celebration. This practice often accompanied offerings of first fruits brought to sacred spaces in an expression of dependence and appreciation. Festivals such as Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, reinforces this perspective. Families dwelled in temporary shelters to remember their ancestors' journey through the wilderness and to recognize how fragile human life can be. Even in times of abundance, they remembered that security ultimately came from beyond themselves. The act of speaking gratitude carried special importance. Words transformed awareness into action. Gratitude that remained unspoken could easily fade into assumption. A gratitude that was voiced became part of communal memory and identity. The Psalms served as reminders that every harvest, every meal, and every season of provision depended on factors larger than individual effort. They encouraged humility by reminding people that no one controlled the rain, the seasons, or the fertility of the land. In a world where self-sufficiency can easily become an illusion, the Psalms continually directed attention back toward gratitude and dependence. Their repeated recitation across generations created a rhythm of remembrance, ensuring that thankfulness remained as a living practice rather than a forgotten idea. The story of the Harvest Psalm teaches that gratitude becomes most powerful when it is expressed. It reminds us that acknowledging blessings out loud deepens our awareness of them. In every moment when we pause to name what sustains us, when we speak appreciation rather than assuming what we have will always remain, we participate in this ancient tradition. The Psalms show that gratitude is not only a feeling carried within the heart, it is also something spoken into the world, creating connection between people, community, history, and the source of life itself. Through words of thanksgiving, abundance becomes more than possession. It becomes relationship, memory, and shared recognition of the gifts that sustain us all. Story 4. The Spring Libations. What is poured returns. For the peoples of early northern Europe, winter was a season of endurance. Long months of cold, darkness, and scarcity tested both communities and individuals. When spring finally arrived, it was more than a change in weather. It was a renewal of life itself. Snow melted, animals emerged from shelters, and the earth began once again to produce growth. This return of life was not taken for granted. Instead, it was marked through rituals that expressed gratitude for survival and hope for the seasons ahead. Among the most meaningful of these practices were libations, the pouring of liquid offering into the earth, into sacred fires, or at places believed to be inhabited by spiritual forces. Though simple in appearance, these acts carried deep symbolic meaning. They reflected an understanding that what sustains life should not be held entirely for oneself, but shared with the powers, spirits, and cycles that make life possible. The liquids used in libations often included mead, ale, or milk, each carrying its own symbolism. Mead represented sweetness, transformation, and the patient work of bees and people alike. Ale reflected both natural processes and human skill, while milk symbolized nourishment and life itself. During seasonal festivals, communal gatherings, or personal moments of reverence, a portion of these precious resources would be poured out as an offering. These libations were often directed toward the land vitir, the land spirits believed to protect specific places, as well as toward ancestors and unseen forces connected to the natural world. The act was usually quiet and straightforward. There was no need for grandeur. The power lay in the intention. As the liquid disappeared into the soil or flames, participants recognized that what had been given was not lost but returned to the larger cycle from which it came. This practice reflected a worldview shaped by seasonal uncertainty. In a harsh environment, it would have been easy to cling tightly to every resource. Yet libations encouraged the opposite response. They invited people to release a portion of what they possessed and trust in the ongoing flow of life. Gratitude in this context was not simply appreciation for survival. It was participation in the exchange that sustained the world. Giving became a way of remaining connected to nature, ancestors, and community. The offering symbolized trust that abundance grows through circulation rather than accumulation. By pouring out a small portion, people acknowledged that they were part of something larger than themselves and dependent upon forces beyond their control. The story of the spring libations reminds us that gratitude is not only about receiving, it is also about releasing. In every act of generosity, every offering made without expectation of return, and every moment when we recognize that life flourishes through connection rather than possession, we reflect the wisdom of this tradition. The libation teaches that abundance is not diminished by sharing. Instead, it continues to flow. What is poured out returns in new forms, nourishing the larger cycle of life. Through this simple act, gratitude becomes visible, reminding us that what we give away can be just as meaningful as what we keep. Daily thread for May 29th. Gratitude begins before you receive. What you honor expands. Giving keeps life in motion. Speak what sustains you into the world. Not everything given is lost. Release strengthens trust in abundance. You are part of the cycle, not outside it. What flows continues to grow.